No one alive can make that shot. The words cut through the mountain air like a blade. 26-year-old Staff Sergeant Mara Vance didn't flinch. Below her scope, 2,200 yards down the valley, three enemy generals stood exposed, laughing, unguarded, untouchable. The distance was impossible. Physics said no. Every combat record said no. Her commander said no. But Mara's finger rested on the trigger anyway. What happened in the next 12 seconds would end a war, rewrite the record books, and prove that the quietest person in the room had already calculated the impossible. Before we begin, please follow my story to the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment about what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story can travel. The ridge smelled like burnt stone and dry wind. Mara Vance lay flat against the shale, her body molded into the earth like she'd been there for centuries. The rocks bit into her elbows. Dust clung to her eyelashes. Her rifle, a customized M2010 ESR with hand-loaded .300 Winchester Magnum rounds, rested in front of her like an extension of her skeleton. She'd carried it for 3 years. It knew her breathing. She knew its temper. Around her, the rest of the reconnaissance team settled into their hides. 6 operators, elite, seasoned, men who'd seen things that didn't make it into after-action reports. They moved with the kind of efficiency that came from too many close calls and not enough sleep. This was supposed to be easy. Observe, record, extract. No contact, no shots, no heroics. Just another surveillance op in a war that had dragged on long enough that people back home had stopped asking why. "Vance, you set?" The voice crackled through her earpiece, low, clipped, professional. "Set," she replied. Her voice was quiet. It always was. Commander Ryan Holt lay 15 meters to her left, partially concealed behind a jagged outcrop. He was 42, built like a fire hydrant, and had the kind of face that looked permanently skeptical. 2 deployments in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan. A silver star he never talked about. He'd seen snipers come and go. Most were good. A few were great. Mara was something else, but he didn't trust her yet. None of them did. She was new to the team, attached 3 weeks ago when their primary marksman took shrapnel to the shoulder in Kandahar. She was Army, not Navy. A staff sergeant, not an operator. And worst of all, she was quiet in a way that made people uncomfortable. Didn't joke, didn't complain, didn't try to prove anything. She just watched and calculated. "Thermals up," said Corporal Danny Reeves, the team's tech specialist. He crouched behind a portable thermal imaging unit, its screen glowing faintly in the shadow of the rocks. "Compound's active, counting 12, maybe 15 bodies, ground floor mostly." "Any movement on the upper levels?" Holt asked. "Negative. Wait." Reeves leaned closer to the screen. "Yeah, 3 signatures. Second floor, northwest corner, just standing there." Holt adjusted his binoculars. The compound sat in the valley below like a tumor. Squat, reinforced concrete, solar panels on the roof, satellite dishes angled toward the sky. It had been flagged by intelligence 2 months ago as a regional command center. High-value targets rotated through irregularly. The mission brief had been clear. Get eyes on, confirm identities, relay to command. Do not engage. The distance alone made engagement absurd. They were positioned 2,187 yards from the compound, just over 1.24 miles. Mara had ranged it twice with the laser designator to be sure. The wind was inconsistent, gusting between 8 and 14 knots from the northwest. Temperature was dropping as the sun angled lower. Humidity sat around 32%. Every variable mattered. Every number was a blade that could cut you. "Vance, what's your hold on wind?" Holt asked. He always tested her. Always. Mara didn't take her eye off the scope. 8 knots surface, 12 at mid-range, estimating 14 at peak altitude based on cloud drift. "You sure about that?" "No." Holt almost smiled. Honesty was rare. "Then don't shoot anything." "Wasn't planning to." Reeves snorted. "She's got jokes." "She's got a rifle," muttered Sergeant First Class Luis Ortega, the team's breacher. He was massive, 6'3", 220, hands like catcher's mitts. He didn't like snipers. Too much waiting, not enough violence. "We gonna sit here all day, or—" "We sit," Holt said. "That's the job." Ortega shrugged and pulled out a protein bar. Minutes bled into an hour. The valley stayed quiet except for the wind and the occasional distant engine. A goat wandered across the southern ridgeline. A bird circled overhead, some kind of hawk. Mara tracked it briefly through her scope, watching the way it adjusted its wings to catch thermals. Everything flew on math. Even birds knew that. Vance, she blinked. Holt was staring at her. You good? Affirm. You've been on glass for 90 minutes. Rotate out. Let your eyes rest. I'm fine. That wasn't a suggestion. Mara exhaled slowly and pulled back from the scope. The world expanded again, color, depth, periphery. Her right eye ached. She rubbed it with the heel of her palm and reached for her canteen. The water was warm and tasted like plastic. Reeves glanced over. You always this fun? Pretty much. Damn. Remind me not to invite you to parties. You won't, he grinned. Fair. Holt's radio hissed. A voice came through, distant, distorted by encryption. Overwatch 1, this is Pegasus. Stand by for update. Holt keyed his mic. Overwatch 1 standing by. 30 seconds of static. Then, we have positive ID on primary targets. Repeat, positive ID. 3 HVTs confirmed in compound. Call signs Rook 7, Rook 9, Rook 12. The air changed. Everyone felt it. Holt's jaw tightened. Reeves sat up straighter. Ortega stopped chewing. Confirm Pegasus. All 3 rooks are on site? Affirmative. Visual confirmation via satellite. They arrived 40 minutes ago. Upper floor, northwest wing. High confidence. Holt looked at Mara. She was already back on the scope. The 3 signatures Reeves had spotted weren't just bodies. They were generals. Enemy command staff. The kind of people who planned operations, allocated resources, signed death warrants. Intelligence had been hunting them for 8 months. Separately, they were dangerous. Together, they were a strategic asset. And right now, they were standing in front of a window. Pegasus, what's the directive? Holt asked. Silence. Then, stand by. Standing by. More silence. Mara watched the 3 figures through her scope. They were talking, gesturing. One of them pointed at something outside the window, maybe the valley, maybe the road. Another laughed. The third checked his watch. They had no idea they were being observed. No idea they were in the crosshairs of a decision being made 5,000 miles away by people who would never hear the gunshot. Holt's radio crackled again. Overwatch 1, be advised. RO remains observe only. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. Continue surveillance and report movement. Holt closed his eyes for a moment. Then, copy Pegasus. Overwatch 1 will maintain posture. He killed the radio and turned to the team. You heard it. We watch. We don't touch. Ortega cursed under his breath. Reeves shook his head. Another operator, Corporal Mike Tran, the medic, just stared at the compound like he was watching money burn. Mara said nothing. Holt caught her expression. Something on your mind, Vance? She didn't look away from the scope. They're leaving. What? They're moving toward the door. 30 seconds, maybe less. Holt grabbed his binoculars. She was right. The 3 figures were turning, stepping away from the window. Pegasus, Overwatch 1. Targets are mobile. Repeat, targets are moving, requesting guidance. Maintain observation. Do not engage. The words felt hollow. Holt watched the generals disappear from view. The window went dark. Gone. God damn it, Ortega muttered. Tron shook his head. We just let them walk. That's the order, Holt said, but his voice had no weight. Mara pulled back from her rifle. Her face was unreadable. Reeves glanced at her. You ever think about what you could do with a shot like that? Every day, she said quietly. Yeah? Yeah. He waited for more. She didn't give it. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across the valley like fingers. 2 hours later, the team was prepping for extract when Reeves sat up. Wait, we've got movement again. Holt moved to the thermal unit. Where? Same room, 2nd floor, 3 signatures. They're back. Everyone froze. Holt keyed the radio. Pegasus, Overwatch 1. Targets have returned to previous location. Repeat, Rook 7, 9, and 12 are static in the northwest wing. Copy, Overwatch 1. Continue observation. Holt looked at Mara. She was already on the scope. They're at the window again, she said. No cover, no movement. How long? No idea. Could be 30 seconds. Could be 30 minutes. Holt stared at the compound. The math was screaming at him. 3 targets, 1 opportunity. 0 authorization. He ran the numbers in his head. The range was insane. 2,187 yards. The longest confirmed combat kill on record was 2,475 yards, made by a Canadian sniper in Iraq with a .50 caliber and perfect conditions. This was close. Too close. And the conditions weren't perfect. Wind shear, humidity, altitude. Bullet drop at that range would be over 30 feet. Drift could be 6 feet or more. The margin of error was measured in fractions of a degree. One miscalculation and the round wouldn't just miss. It would announce their position, compromise the mission, get people killed. He looked at Mara. She was still, calm, breathing slow. Vance. Yeah. Could you make that shot? She didn't hesitate. Yes. You sure? No. Holt almost laughed. That's not reassuring. You asked if I could. I can. You didn't ask if I'd guarantee it. What's the difference? About 30 variables I can't control. Ortega leaned in. Commander, we going to talk about this or just stare at them? Holt didn't answer. He was doing the calculation every team leader hated, risk versus reward, mission parameters versus opportunity, rules versus results. Pegasus, Overwatch 1. Request immediate ROE update. Targets are exposed and vulnerable. This is a fleeting window. Static. Then, Overwatch 1, stand by. We don't have time to stand by. Overwatch 1, I said stand by. Holt wanted to put his fist through the radio. Mara's voice cut through the silence. Commander? What? I need to know now. Know what? If you're going to let me take the shot. Everyone looked at her. Holt stared. We don't have authorization. I know. One missed shot ends this mission. I know. You understand what you're asking me to do? Mara finally looked away from the scope. Her eyes were gray, cold, clear, unblinking. I'm not asking you to do anything, she said. I'm telling you what I can do. You decide if it's worth it. The wind picked up. Dust swirled across the ridge. Holt's radio hissed again. Overwatch 1 Pegasus, ROE remains unchanged. Observe only. Acknowledge. He didn't key the mic. He looked at Mara, then at the compound, then back at Mara. How confident are you? Confident enough to try. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Ortega leaned close to Holt. Boss, if she says she can do it, she's been with us 3 weeks, Holt snapped. I don't know her. I don't know her limits. I don't know if she's ever made a shot past 1,000 yards in combat. Mara reached into her pack. She pulled out a small, weather-beaten notebook. The cover was stained. The edges were frayed. She handed it to Holt. He opened it. Pages and pages of data. Range tables, wind calculations, ballistic coefficients, diagrams of trajectories, shot logs with dates, distances, conditions, results. 1,850 yards. Hit. 1,920 yards. Hit. 2,100 yards. Hit. 2,150 yards. Miss. Wind call error. 2,150 yards. Hit. Holt stared at the numbers. Where the hell did you shoot these? Montana, Wyoming, Nevada, wherever I could find the distance. Why? Because I wanted to know if I could. He flipped through more pages. The data was meticulous, obsessive, every shot analyzed, every failure dissected. Jesus Christ, he muttered. Reeves looked over his shoulder. Is that... She's been training for this, Holt said quietly. Mara nodded. For 3 years. Why? Because no one else was. The radio crackled. Overwatch 1. Acknowledge last transmission. Holt looked at the compound. The 3 figures were still there, still talking. still alive. He thought about the intelligence reports, the operations those 3 men had planned, the ambushes, the IEDs, the villages burned, the soldiers who didn't come home. He thought about the rulebook, and then he stopped thinking. Vance, yeah, you get 1 chance, 1. If you miss, we collapse this position and run like hell. Understood? Understood. And if anyone asks, I gave no order. Copy. Holt keyed his mic. Pegasus, Overwatch 1. Acknowledge ROE. Continuing observation, out. He looked at the team. Reeves, Tran, get ready to move. Ortega, security. This goes sideways, we extract hard and fast. Ortega grinned. Now we're talking. Mara settled back into position. Her heartbeat slowed, her breathing deepened. She ran the numbers one more time. Range, 2,187 yards. Wind, 8 knots surface, 12 knots mid, 14 knots peak. Temperature 62 degrees Fahrenheit, dropping. Humidity, 32%. Barometric pressure, 29.87 inches of mercury. Elevation difference, 340 feet. Coriolis effect, negligible at this range, but she factored it anyway. Bullet drop, 31.2 feet. Windage, 5.8 feet right. She adjusted the scope. Click, click, click. Fractions of an inch. Her finger found the trigger. She felt the cold metal, the familiar curve. Below, one of the generals gestured. Another nodded. The third checked his watch again. Mara exhaled halfway. Held it. The world went silent. And then, a gust of wind hit the ridge. She felt it on her neck, saw it ripple the camouflage netting. Her brain recalculated in milliseconds. Wind spike, 12 knots, shift windage, 0.5 mil. She adjusted, exhaled the rest of the breath. Her finger tightened. The rifle roared. Recoil slammed into her shoulder like a truck. The sound echoed across the valley, sharp, violent, unmistakable. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. The bullet flew. Mara didn't blink. She watched through the scope as the round traced an invisible arc across the sky, dropping, drifting, fighting physics every inch of the way. And then, impact. The first general's head snapped back. He collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. The other 2 froze. Mara was already chambering the next round. The bolt cycled, smooth, fast. She reacquired the second target. He was turning, confusion just beginning to register on his face. She fired. The second general dropped. The third one moved. Panic overrode paralysis. He dove toward the door. Mara tracked him. Calculated lead. Adjusted for motion. Fired. The third shot punched through the window frame and found him mid-stride. He fell. 12 seconds. 3 rounds. 3 bodies. Silence. Mara pulled back from the scope. Her hands were steady. Holt stared at the compound through his binoculars, his mouth open. Holy shit, Reeves whispered. Ortega laughed, a sharp, disbelieving bark. Did she just... She did, Tran said. Below, the compound erupted. Voices shouted. Doors slammed. Vehicles started. Holt snapped out of it. Move. Now. Collapse the position. Go. 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 Mara was already breaking down her rifle. Bolt out. Scope off. Weapon into the case. 30 seconds. The team moved like water. Fast, efficient, practiced. Reeves grabbed the thermal unit. Tran packed the med kit. Ortega covered their 6. They slipped off the ridge and into the rocks, moving fast and low. Behind them, the valley filled with noise. Ahead, the extraction point waited. Holt ran alongside Mara. He kept glancing at her like she might evaporate. How? He finally asked. She didn't slow down. Math. That's it? That's it. He wanted to say more, wanted to demand an explanation, wanted to understand how a staff sergeant with 3 weeks on the team had just done something that shouldn't be possible. But there was no time. They ran, and behind them, 3 bodies cooled in a room no one had thought was in range. The extraction point was a dried riverbed 3 miles northeast, a scar in the earth wide enough for a helicopter to drop in fast and pull out faster. The team moved through the rocks like ghosts, boots finding purchase on loose shale, breath controlled despite the pace. No one spoke. Radio discipline held. Behind them, the valley echoed with diesel engines and shouted orders. Mara ran in the middle of the formation, rifle case strapped across her back, chest rig bouncing with each stride. Her legs burned, lungs pulled thin mountain air, but her mind was quiet. 3 shots. 3 hits. The math had worked. Holt led the column, moving with the kind of controlled aggression that came from too many compromised exfils. He checked his GPS every 30 seconds, adjusted their heading, kept them on pace. His jaw was locked tight. He hadn't said a word since they left the ridge. Reeves ran behind Mara, the thermal unit secured in his pack. He was grinning, couldn't help it. Adrenaline and disbelief made a hell of a cocktail. Ortega brought up the rear, rifle up, scanning their 6. Every few minutes he'd glance forward at Mara like she'd sprouted wings. They hit the riverbed 40 minutes later. Holt raised a fist. The team collapsed into defensive positions along the embankment. Fields of fire established, sectors assigned, silence maintained. Tron pulled out the satellite radio and started the extract request. His hands moved fast, practiced. Mara knelt behind a cluster of rocks, scanning the southern approach. Her breathing had already normalized, heart rate steady. She pulled a protein bar from her pocket, tore it open with her teeth, chewed mechanically. Ortega slid in beside her. "You good?" "Yeah." "That was the craziest shit I've ever seen." She didn't respond. "I'm serious. I've been doing this for 8 years. Never seen anything like that." Mara swallowed. "You've seen plenty of long-range shots." "Not like that. Not at that distance. Not 3 in a row." He shook his head. "How long you been shooting?" "Since I was 12. 12? My dad was a competitive shooter. Taught me the basics. I kept going after he died." Ortega went quiet for a second. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He's the reason I'm here." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Tran's voice cut through the silence. "Birds inbound. ETA 12 minutes. Holt moved to the center of the perimeter. "Reeves, any movement on thermals?" Reeves had the unit out, scanning the valley behind them. "Negative. Compounds lit up like a Christmas tree, but no pursuit. They're still trying to figure out what happened." "They'll figure it out soon enough." Holt checked his watch. "Stay tight. We extract clean, we debrief clean, and nobody talks about what happened up there unless command asks directly. Clear?" "Clear," the team echoed. Holt's eyes found Mara. "Vance. A word." She stood and followed him 20 feet from the perimeter. He turned to face her, arms crossed. For a long moment, he just stared. "You just made me a liar," he said finally. "How?" "I told Pegasus we were observing. That's it. No engagement. You didn't give me an order to fire. Semantics. Not to jag." Holt's expression flickered, something between irritation and respect. "You think that matters? You think they won't ask questions when 3 enemy generals turn up dead from headshots at over 2,000 yards? "They'll ask," Mara said, "but they won't find answers unless you give them. You're willing to bet your career on that?" "I don't have a career. I have a skill set. If they want to court-martial me for using it, that's their call." Holt exhaled hard. "You really don't care, do you?" "About what?" "Recognition. Rank. Credit." Mara looked past him, toward the valley. "I care about results. 3 fewer people planning ambushes, 3 fewer signatures on kill orders. That's what matters." "That's not how the system works." "I know." "Then why do it?" She met his eyes. "Because someone had to." Holt studied her face, searching for arrogance, bravado, anything that would make sense. He found nothing but flat certainty. "How old are you?" he asked. 26. "You've been in what, 4 years?" 5. "And you've been practicing shots like that for 3? "Yes." "Why?" Mara hesitated. The question had layers. She chose the surface answer. "Because I wanted to be ready when it mattered." "Ready for what?" "This." The sound of rotor blades began to thump in the distance, low, rhythmic, growing louder. Holt glanced toward the sound, then back at Mara. "This conversation isn't over. Copy." They moved back to the perimeter. The team was already prepping for extract, packs tightened, weapons checked, positions abandoned. The Black Hawk came in low and fast, flaring hard over the riverbed, rotors kicking up dust and gravel. The side doors were open. A crew chief waved them in. Holt went first. Then Reeves, Tran, Ortega. Mara climbed aboard last, taking a seat near the rear. The crew chief gave her a thumbs up. She returned it. The bird lifted, banked hard, and roared north. Below, the valley shrank. The compound became a speck. The ridge where she'd fired was already invisible. Mara closed her eyes and felt the vibration of the helicopter through her spine. 3 shots. 12 seconds. It was done. Forward. Operating Base Cobra sat in the desert like a scab. Prefab buildings, HESCO barriers, guard towers, and a landing pad that always smelled like JP-8 fuel. The Black Hawk touched down at 23:40 hours. The team offloaded in silence, moving through the dust cloud toward the operations center. A lieutenant met them at the door, young, nervous, clipboard in hand. "Commander Holt?" "Yeah?" "Colonel Mendez wants to see you, now." Holt nodded. "Tell him I'll be there in 10. "He said now, sir." Holt's expression hardened. 10 minutes. The lieutenant hesitated, then nodded and disappeared. Holt turned to the team. "Gear down, debrief in 30. Vance, you're with me." Mara followed him through the base. They passed rows of containerized housing units, a chow hall that was closed for the night, a maintenance bay where mechanics worked under harsh fluorescent lights. Holt didn't speak. His boots hit the gravel in sharp, measured steps. They reached the command building, a reinforced structure with air conditioning that actually worked. Holt pushed through the door. Inside, the air was cool and smelled like coffee and stress. Colonel David Mendez stood in the operations center, arms crossed, staring at a bank of monitors. He was 53, gray at the temples, with a face carved from too many decisions that kept him awake at night. He'd commanded the task force for 18 months. He didn't tolerate surprises. He turned as Holt entered. "Commander? Sir?" Mendez's eyes shifted to Mara. "Staff Sergeant Vance? Sir?" "Close the door." Holt did. Mendez gestured to a monitor. Satellite imagery filled the screen, thermal overlay of the compound. 3 heat signatures on the second floor. Timestamp, 15:47 hours. The same moment Mara had fired. Mendez tapped the screen. "Explain." Holt kept his voice level. "We observed the compound per mission parameters. Targets were identified. We relayed to Pegasus. Maintained observation until extract." "That's not what I asked." Silence. Mendez zoomed in on the compound. 20 minutes after your extract, local forces found 3 bodies. Enemy command staff, all dead from long-range rifle fire. Headshots, precision kills. He looked at Holt. "You want to tell me how that happened?" "We maintained observation, sir. What occurred at the compound is outside our scope." Mendez's jaw tightened. "Don't insult my intelligence, Commander. The ballistics are being analyzed as we speak. When they trace the trajectory, it's going to lead straight back to that ridge, and when it does, I need to know what the hell happened up there." Holt said nothing. Mendez turned to Mara. "Staff Sergeant, did you fire your weapon today?" Mara met his gaze. "I performed my duties as assigned, sir." "That's not an answer. It's the one I have." Mendez stared at her. She didn't blink. He turned back to Holt. "You know what this looks like? It looks like a rogue operation, unauthorized engagement, a violation of ROE that could turn into an international incident if the wrong people start asking questions." "Sir, with respect, 3 enemy generals are dead. That's a strategic win." "A win I didn't authorize." Mendez's voice dropped. "You put me in an impossible position, Ryan. If I report this, you're looking at an Article 15 at minimum, possibly a court-martial. If I don't, I'm covering up a breach of protocol that could blow back on this entire command." "Then make it disappear," Holt said. Mendez blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. No shots were fired. The mission went as planned. Whatever happened at that compound is enemy on enemy. Equipment malfunction. Act of God. I don't care. But you bury it, and 3 high-value targets stay dead. You investigate it, and you waste time on optics while the war keeps moving." Mendez's eyes narrowed. "You're asking me to lie in an official report. I'm asking you to prioritize results over procedure." The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Mendez looked at Mara again. What was the range? Sir? The range. How far were you from the compound? Mara hesitated. 2,187 yards, sir. Mendez's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. That's over a mile. Yes, sir. And you made 3 headshots. Yes, sir. And how long? 12 seconds. Mendez exhaled slowly. He turned to the monitor, stared at the thermal images, then back at Mara. Who trained you? I trained myself, sir. Bullshit. It's the truth. I studied ballistics, atmospheric science, marksmanship theory. I practiced whenever I could find the distance. Why? Because I wanted to be useful. Mendez studied her face. You understand that what you did today is going to generate questions. People are going to want to know how a staff sergeant made shots that shouldn't be possible. Let them ask, sir. And what will you tell them? Math, when, practice, same thing I'd tell anyone. Mendez almost smiled. Almost. He turned to Holt. You trust her? Holt glanced at Mara. She stood perfectly still, hands at her sides, face unreadable. I do now, Holt said. Mendez nodded slowly. All right. Here's what's going to happen. The mission report will state that you observed the compound, identified the targets, and extracted without incident. No shots fired, no engagement. What happened at the compound will be attributed to internal conflict. The intelligence community will take credit for destabilizing enemy command. We'll let them. And if ballistics traces it back to us, they won't. I'll make sure of it. Mendez looked at Mara. As for you, Staff Sergeant, you just earned yourself a very quiet commendation that will never see the light of day. You'll also stay with Commander Holt's team for the remainder of this deployment. He seems to think you're worth keeping around. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. You just made my job a hell of a lot harder. He gestured to the door. Dismissed. They left. Outside, the desert air was cool and dry. Stars filled the sky in dense clusters, constellations Mara had memorized as a kid. Holt stopped and turned to face her. You good? Yeah. That was a hell of a risk you took in there. You took it first. Fair point. He shook his head. I still don't understand how you did it. You saw the notebook. I saw numbers. That's not the same as understanding. Mara looked up at the stars. My dad used to say that shooting is just physics with consequences. You calculate the variables, account for the chaos, and trust the math. The hard part isn't the shot. It's believing the math when everything else says it's impossible. And you believed it? I had to. Otherwise, I wouldn't have pulled the trigger. Holt was quiet for a moment. Your dad sounds like he was a smart guy. He was. What happened to him? Cancer. 8 years ago. I'm sorry. Me too. They walked back toward the housing units. The base was quiet except for the distant hum of generators and the occasional burst of radio chatter. Holt stopped outside his quarters. Get some sleep, Vance. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Copy. She turned to leave. Vance? She looked back. That shot you made today? That's going to follow you. People are going to ask questions. Some will want to use you. Some will want to prove you got lucky. You ready for that? Mara's expression didn't change. I've been ready for 3 years. Holt nodded. Good. Because I have a feeling we're just getting started. The team gathered for a debrief at 0600 hours in a windowless room that smelled like stale coffee and dry erase markers. Holt stood at the front, arms crossed, waiting for everyone to settle. Reeves sat with his boots propped on a chair. Tran nursed a thermos of something that was probably not regulation. Ortega leaned against the wall, eyes half closed but still tracking every movement in the room. Mara sat in the back corner, hands folded, silent. Holt started. Official story, we observed, we recorded, we extracted. No shots fired, no engagement. The enemy command staff deaths are being attributed to internal conflict. That's the story. That's what goes in the report. That's what you tell anyone who asks. Clear? Clear, the team echoed. Good. Now the unofficial story. Holt looked at each of them. What happened on that ridge stays between us. Vance made 3 impossible shots and saved us months of intelligence work. She did it without authorization, without backup, and without hesitation. And because of that, 3 enemy generals are off the board. Reeves grinned. Hell yeah. Ortega nodded. Damn right. Tron raised his thermos. To Vance. The team echoed it. To Vance. Mara didn't react, she just sat there watching. Holt continued. That said, we got lucky. If she'd missed, we'd be sitting in a black site right now explaining why we compromised a surveillance op. So going forward, we do things by the book. No cowboy shit. No rogue calls. We operate as a team and we trust each other to make the right call when it matters. Understood? Understood. Good. Now get out of here. We've got another op in 48 hours. The team filed out. Mara stood to leave. Vance, stay. She sat back down. Holt waited until the room was empty, then pulled up a chair and sat across from her. I need to know something, he said. Okay. When you took that shot, were you certain you'd hit? Mara thought about it. No. Then why pull the trigger? Because the math said I had a chance, and a chance was better than nothing. That's not how most snipers think. I'm not most snipers. Holt leaned back. No, you're not. He studied her face. You know what the longest confirmed kill in history is? 2,475 yards. Canadian sniper. Iraq. 2017. You were less than 300 yards short of that, and you did it 3 times in a row. I know. You realize what that means? It means I got lucky with the wind. Holt shook his head. It means you're operating at a level most people don't believe exists, and that's going to make you a target. A target for what? Expectations, pressure, people who want to prove you wrong, people who want to use you. He leaned forward. You're not just a sniper anymore, Mara. You're a problem solver, and the military loves problem solvers. They'll use you until you break. I won't break. Everyone breaks. Not me. Holt held her gaze. She didn't blink. All right, he said quietly. But when it gets hard, and it will, you come to me. You don't bury it. You don't try to handle it alone. You trust the team. Deal? Deal. Holt stood. Get some rest. You earned it. Mara left the room and walked back to her quarters, a small containerized unit with a cot, a locker, and a window that faced the wire. She dropped her gear, sat on the cot, and pulled out her notebook. She flipped to the last entry. 2,187 yards. 3 targets, 3 hits. Wind, 8 to 14 knots, variable. Conditions, suboptimal. Result, success. She closed the notebook and stared at the ceiling. 3 years of preparation, 3 seconds per shot. And now, 3 fewer names on an enemy roster. It should have felt like victory, but all she felt was the weight of what came next. Because Holt was right. This was just the beginning. 2 days later, the team deployed again, this time to a ridge overlooking a supply route used by enemy logistics. The mission was identical: observe, record, report. But this time, when Mara settled into position, the team watched her differently. Reeves checked her angles. Tron asked about wind calculations. Ortega wanted to see the notebook. Holt noticed. She's not a circus act, he said quietly. Let her work. They backed off. But the damage was done. Mara felt it, the weight of expectation, the assumption that she'd perform miracles on demand. She ignored it and focused on the scope. The convoy appeared an hour later, 3 trucks, moving slow, heavily loaded. Mara ranged them. 1,400 yards, well within her capability. Holt's radio crackled. Overwatch 2 Pegasus, confirm visual on convoy. Confirmed, 3 vehicles, positive ID on cargo. Copy, maintain observation. The convoy kept moving. Mara tracked it through the scope, watching the way the lead driver adjusted for ruts in the road, the way the second truck lagged slightly behind. Reeves whispered, "You could take out the lead vehicle easy." "Not the mission," Mara said. "I know, I'm just saying." "Don't." The convoy disappeared over a hill. Mission complete. They extracted without incident. But on the flight back, Mara noticed the way Holt kept glancing at her. And she knew. The quiet person who solved the impossible wasn't quiet anymore. She was a weapon. And weapons didn't get to choose when they were used. The change came 3 weeks later. Mara felt it before anyone said a word. The way Holt briefed missions shifted, less emphasis on observation, more on contingencies. The way command tasked the team evolved, higher risk targets, tighter windows, situations that required precision under pressure. And the way the team looked at her changed from curiosity to reliance. She was no longer the new attachment. She was the insurance policy. It happened gradually, like water wearing stone. A convoy here, a patrol there, each mission pushing closer to the edge of engagement. Each briefing included a line that hadn't been there before. Vance will provide overwatch with authorization to engage if opportunity presents. Authorization. That was the word that mattered. What had been forbidden 3 weeks ago was now doctrine. Mara said nothing. She took the assignments, made the shots when required, logged the data, and moved on. 12 missions in 21 days. 7 confirmed kills, all beyond 1,200 yards, all clean, all surgical. The team stopped asking how she did it. They just expected her to. The operations center smelled like burned coffee and sweat. Holt stood at the front of the room beside a map projected on the wall. Grid lines, elevation markers, red circles indicating enemy positions. The team sat in folding chairs, attention locked forward. Colonel Mendez stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching. "Listen up," Holt said. "We've got a situation developing in Sector 7. Intelligence intercepted communications indicating a high-level meeting scheduled for tomorrow at 1400 hours. Location is a farmhouse compound approximately 18 miles northeast of here." He tapped the map. A satellite image appeared. A cluster of buildings surrounded by terraced fields, a dirt road snaking through the valley, mountains rising on 3 sides. Attendees include multiple brigade commanders, logistics coordinators, and at least one known bomb maker responsible for IEDs that killed 6 coalition personnel last month. This is a target-rich environment. Command wants eyes on. If the opportunity presents, we have authorization to disrupt. Reeves leaned forward. Disrupt how? However makes sense. Holt looked at Mara. Vance will have final discretion on engagement based on range and conditions. Ortega grinned. So, basically, she decides who lives and who doesn't. Basically, Holt said. Mara felt the weight of every eye in the room. Mendez stepped forward. "Staff Sergeant Vance." She stood. "Sir?" "This is a fluid situation. Rules of engagement are broad, but they're not blank. You engage only confirmed hostile targets. You confirm identification through multiple sources. And you do not fire unless you're certain of the outcome. Understood?" "Understood, sir." "Good. Because if this goes sideways, it's my ass on the line." He looked at Holt. "Yours too, Commander." "Acknowledged, sir." Mendez nodded and left the room. Holt turned back to the team. "We inserted 0400. Hike to observation point Alpha." He tapped the map again, highlighting a ridgeline overlooking the compound. "An established position no later than 0800. The meeting is scheduled for 1400, but we expect arrivals starting around noon. We hold position, gather intel, and wait for Vance's call." Tran raised a hand. "What's the distance from OP Alpha to the compound?" Holt glanced at Mara. 2,340 yards, she said quietly. The room went silent. Reeves whistled. "That's farther than last time." "By 150 yards, Mara confirmed. Ortega shook his head. "You've shot that far before?" "Once. In Nevada. Hit rate was 60%. 60%? Tran looked skeptical. "That's not great odds." "It's better than 0, Mara said. Holt cut in. "The shot's possible. That's all that matters. If conditions are favorable and targets present, she takes it. If not, we observe and extract. Simple." Nothing about it was simple. They all knew it. But no one said it out loud. But Sam and means. The insertion went smooth. 2 Blackhawks dropped them 6 miles from the target zone at 0415 hours. The team moved through the darkness in total silence, night vision painting the world in shades of green, boots finding purchase on rocky terrain, weapons at low ready. Mara carried her rifle in a padded case strapped across her back. The weight was familiar, comforting. She'd carried it so many times the balance felt like an extension of her skeleton. They reached OP Alpha at 0750 hours. 10 minutes ahead of schedule. The position was a natural hide on the ridgeline, concealed by scrub brush and jagged rock formations. Below, the valley spread out like a map. Terraced fields, irrigation ditches, the compound sitting in the center like a bullseye. Holt deployed the team. Reeves set up the thermal and communications gear. Tron established a casualty collection point and prepped medical supplies. Ortega took security, scanning approaches with his rifle optic. Mara found her spot, a depression between two boulders that provided cover and a clean line of sight to the compound. She unpacked her rifle with the precision of a surgeon laying out instruments. Barrel, bolt, scope, bipod, each component locked into place with satisfying clicks. She settled in behind the weapon and began her work. Range, 2,340 yards. She lasered the compound 3 times to confirm. The numbers held. Wind, inconsistent. Surface gusts between 6 and 10 knots from the west. Mid-range, likely higher. She watched dust devils spin across the fields, tracked cloud movement, felt the breeze against her neck. Temperature, 71 degrees Fahrenheit. Rising. Humidity, 28%. Dropping. Barometric pressure, 29.91 inches of mercury. She pulled out her notebook and began calculating. Bullet drop at this range would exceed 35 feet. Windage could vary by 8 feet depending on cross currents. The margin for error was razor thin. Holt crawled up beside her. "You good?" "Working on it." "What's the assessment?" "Possible, not probable." "Odds?" 50-50, maybe worse depending on wind. Holt studied the valley. "That good enough?" Mara didn't answer immediately. She watched the way the wind moved across the fields, patterns within chaos, predictable if you knew how to read them. "It'll have to be," she said finally. "That's not reassuring. You want reassurance or honesty?" Holt almost smiled. "Honesty." "Then 50-50 is what you get." He nodded and moved back to the command position. Mara returned to her calculations. She filled 3 pages with numbers, trajectory tables, wind correction factors, elevation adjustments. She cross-referenced her data against past shots, looking for patterns, seeking certainty in mathematics that didn't care about courage or fear. The sun climbed higher. Heat began radiating off the rocks. At 11:47 hours, Reeves spoke quietly. Movement. 3 vehicles approaching from the south. Mara shifted her scope to the road. 2 trucks and a sedan. Dusty, moving slow, no visible armament. "Thermal confirms multiple occupants," Reeves said. "Counting. 8, maybe 10 total." The vehicles pulled into the compound. Doors opened, men climbed out, civilians by appearance, but movement patterns suggested military training. They carried themselves with the casual alertness of people accustomed to danger. Holt's radio crackled. "Overwatch 2 Pegasus, confirm visual on arrivals." "Confirmed, 3 vehicles, approximately 10 personnel, no visible weapons." "Copy, maintain observation." The men disappeared into the main building. An hour passed, then another. More vehicles arrived. More personnel. The compound filled with bodies, 30, then 40, then more. Thermal signatures bloomed on Reeves' screen like flowers. At 13:58 hours, a black SUV pulled through the gate. Reeves sat up. "That's different." The SUV parked directly in front of the main building. 4 men climbed out, bodyguards clearly. They scanned the area, checked the perimeter, then opened the rear door. A man stepped out. Tall, gray beard, wearing traditional clothing and a tactical vest. Mara zoomed in on his face. She'd seen it before. In briefings, in intelligence packets, in wanted posters. "Pegasus, Overwatch 2. We have positive ID on primary target. Call sign Rook 1. Repeat, Rook 1 is on site." Silence on the radio, then, "Say again, Overwatch 2. Rook 1. Confirmed visual. High confidence." Static. Then, "Stand by." Holt looked at Mara. She was already tracking the target through her scope. Rook 1 was the regional commander, the man responsible for coordinating insurgent operations across 3 provinces. He'd been hunted for 18 months. He never stayed in one place long enough to pin down. He never exposed himself. Until now. He stood outside the building talking with his bodyguards, relaxed, unguarded, perfectly visible. Mara's heartbeat slowed. The radio crackled. Overwatch 2, Pegasus. You are authorized to engage primary target. Repeat, you are cleared hot on Rook 1. Holt keyed his mic. Copy, Pegasus. Cleared hot. He looked at Mara. It's your call. She didn't respond. She was already running the numbers. Range, 2,340 yards. Wind, 9 knots surface. Estimated 12 knots mid-range, 15 at peak. Target, stationary, exposed, surrounded by bodyguards. One shot. One chance. Miss, and he'd disappear forever. Hit, and the war shifted. Her breathing slowed. The world narrowed. She adjusted the scope. Click, click, click. Her finger found the trigger, and then Rook 1 moved. He turned and walked toward the building entrance. Mara tracked him. 5 seconds until he reached cover. 4, 3. Her finger tightened. The rifle roared. Recoil slammed her shoulder. The sound echoed across the valley like thunder splitting stone. For 3 eternal seconds, nothing happened. The bullet flew. Mara watched through the scope, her breath held, her body perfectly still. The round traced its arc, rising, falling, drifting right, fighting wind and gravity and distance. And then, impact. Rook 1's head snapped back. He collapsed on the steps. The bodyguards froze. Mara chambered another round, smooth, fast. One bodyguard dove for cover. Another reached for a radio. She fired. The second bodyguard dropped. Chaos erupted. Men scattered. Doors slammed. Vehicles started. Mara tracked movement, calculating targets, prioritizing threats. A third figure appeared in a doorway, armed, scanning for the source of fire. She fired. He fell. The compound exploded into motion, shouting, gunfire, engines roaring. Holt's voice cut through. Vance, collapse position, now! She was already moving. Bolt out, scope off, rifle into the case. The team moved like a machine, 30 seconds from static position to full withdrawal. They disappeared into the rocks, boots crunching over shale, breath controlled, discipline absolute. Behind them, the valley filled with noise, sirens, gunfire, confusion. But the damage was done. Rook 1 was dead, and Mara had put him there. The exfil was clean. The Black Hawk picked them up 4 miles north at a pre-designated landing zone. They flew low and fast, hugging the terrain, rotors screaming. Mara sat in silence, rifle case between her knees, hands resting on the stock. Ortega leaned over. 3 shots, 3 bodies. You're making this look easy. It's not easy, she said quietly. Could have fooled me. She didn't respond. Reeves grinned. You just smoked the most wanted man in the region from over a mile away. That's legend status. It's math, Mara said. Math doesn't pull the trigger. No, but it tells you when to. Holt watched her from across the cabin. She felt his eyes but didn't look up. They landed at Cobra at 1620 hours. Mendez was waiting on the tarmac. He didn't smile, didn't salute, just gestured for Holt and Mara to follow. They walked to the command building in silence. Inside, Mendez closed the door and turned to face them. Rook 1 is confirmed dead, he said. Ballistics recovered a .300 Win Mag round from the scene. Trajectory analysis confirms the shot originated from OP Alpha, 2,340 yards. He looked at Mara. You just made the second longest confirmed combat kill in history. Mara said nothing. Congratulations, Staff Sergeant. You're now officially a problem. Sir? Mendez pulled up a chair and sat. In the last 3 weeks, you've made 9 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,200 yards. Today, you killed the most wanted insurgent commander in the region. People are noticing. Command is noticing. And when Command notices, they start asking questions. What kind of questions? Holt asked. The kind that lead to reassignments. The kind that pull assets out of the field and put them in training programs. The kind that turn soldiers into symbols. Mendez looked at Mara. You're too valuable to risk now. That's the problem. Mara's expression didn't change. I'm a sniper, sir. I belong in the field. You're a strategic asset. And strategic assets don't get to choose where they belong. Holt stepped forward. Sir, with respect, Vance is part of my team. She operates best in the field. Pulling her out would be a mistake. I agree. But it's not my call. Mendez stood. Orders are coming down from higher. She's being transferred to a specialized training program. They want to study her methods, replicate her results, build a curriculum. When? Holt's voice was flat. 72 hours. The room went silent. Mara felt something shift inside her chest. Not panic, not anger, just a quiet recognition that the thing she'd feared was happening. She was being weaponized, not in the field, in a classroom. Sir, she said quietly. Request permission to speak freely. Mendez nodded. I didn't train for 3 years to teach other people. I trained to do the work. If command wants results, they'll get better results by leaving me where I am. I know, but the decision's already made. Then unmake it. Mendez blinked. Excuse me? You said I'm a strategic asset. Assets have value. Use that value to negotiate. Tell them I stay in the field or I don't cooperate. Holt stared at her. Mendez leaned back. You're asking me to threaten insubordination on your behalf. I'm asking you to prioritize mission effectiveness over bureaucracy. Mendez studied her face. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he smiled, just barely. You've got steel, Staff Sergeant. I'll give you that. He looked at Holt. I'll make the call. No promises, but I'll try. Thank you, sir. Mendez waved them out. In the hallway, Holt stopped and turned to Mara. You just told a colonel to fight command for you. I know. That took guts. It took necessity. Holt shook his head. You really don't care about rank, do you? I care about doing the job. Even if it costs you? Especially then. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Holt said, You know what's going to happen, right? Even if Mendez gets you to stay, this doesn't end. Every shot you make, every record you break, it builds the case for pulling you out. Eventually, they'll win. Maybe. Not maybe. Definitely. Mara stopped and looked at him. Then I'll make every shot count before they do. Mendez made the call. Command pushed back. He pushed harder. 48 hours later, the orders were revised. Mara would remain with Holt's team for the duration of the deployment. After that, reassignment would be evaluated based on operational need. It was a temporary victory, but it was a victory. The team celebrated quietly. Reeves smuggled in contraband whiskey. Ortega told stories that definitely weren't true. Tron played terrible harmonica. They sat in the rec tent, passing the bottle, pretending the war could wait. Mara sat on the edge of the group, watching. Holt sat beside her. You okay? Yeah. You don't look okay. I'm fine. He studied her face. You know they're going to keep trying, right? To pull you out, to turn you into something you're not. I know. And you're okay with that? She took the bottle when it came around, sipped, passed it on. I'm not okay with it, she said quietly, but I'm ready for it. What's the difference? Acceptance doesn't mean surrender. Holt nodded slowly. Fair enough. The night wore on. The team eventually dispersed. Mara walked back to her quarters alone. Inside, she pulled out her notebook and flipped to a blank page. She wrote, 2,340 yards. Rook 1, confirmed kill. Conditions, suboptimal. Wind variable. Heat distortion significant. Result, success. Note, they'll keep pushing. I'll keep shooting. We'll see who breaks first. She closed the notebook and stared at the ceiling. 3 shots had started this. 3 shots had changed everything. And somewhere, someone was already planning what came next. The summons came at 0530 hours. Mara was already awake, sitting on her cot with the notebook open in her lap, reviewing wind tables by the light of a single bulb. She'd learned years ago that sleep was optional. Preparation wasn't. The knock on her door was sharp, official. She opened it to find a corporal she didn't recognize, young, nervous, holding a tablet. Staff Sergeant Vance? Yeah. Colonel Mendez requests your presence in the operations center, immediately. What's this about? He didn't say, Staff Sergeant. Mara grabbed her jacket and followed. The base was still dark, lit only by floodlights and the glow from guard towers. Her boots crunched across gravel. The air was cold and smelled like diesel fuel and dust. Somewhere in the distance, a generator coughed and sputtered. The operations center was lit like a surgical suite, harsh fluorescence, no shadows, everything visible. Mendez stood at the center table, arms crossed, staring at a laptop screen. Beside him stood two men Mara didn't recognize, civilian clothes, hard eyes, the kind of people who didn't wear name tags. Holt was there too, leaning against the wall, jaw tight. Mendez looked up as Mara entered. "Staff Sergeant, thanks for coming." "Sir?" He gestured to the two civilians. "This is Agent Carver and Agent Rhodes, Defense Intelligence Agency." The taller one, Carver, nodded. Rhodes just stared. Mara kept her expression neutral. "What's this about?" Carver stepped forward. "Staff Sergeant Vance, we've been reviewing your operational record for the past 3 weeks. 9 confirmed kills, ranges between 1,247 and 2,340 yards. Average accuracy exceeding 92%. Those are exceptional numbers." "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet." Carver pulled up an image on the laptop. Ballistics data, trajectory analysis, thermal overlays. "We're here because your performance has raised questions." "What kind of questions?" Rhodes spoke for the first time. His voice was flat, clinical. "The kind that ask how a 26-year-old staff sergeant with no formal advanced sniper training is consistently outperforming operators with decades of experience." Mara met his eyes. "Practice. Math. Repetition." "That's what you keep saying. We're here to verify it." Holt pushed off the wall. "Verify what exactly?" Carver raised a hand. "Commander, we're not questioning Staff Sergeant Vance's integrity. We're trying to understand her methodology so we can replicate it." "She already explained her methodology," Holt said. "She studies ballistics, calculates variables, and executes. It's not complicated." "It's also not normal," Rhodes said. "No one shoots like this. Not consistently. Not at these ranges." "Maybe no one else put in the work," Mara said quietly. Rhodes turned to her. "Walk me through your training." "I trained myself." "Where?" "Public ranges, BLM land. Anywhere I could find the distance." "Who funded the ammunition?" "I did. Worked part-time jobs. Saved." "How many rounds per week?" "Depended on the week. Sometimes 50, sometimes 200. Rhodes pulled out a tablet and started typing. "And you kept records of every shot?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because data matters. You can't improve what you don't measure." Carver leaned forward. "Staff Sergeant, we've reviewed your file. You enlisted at 21. Before that, you worked as a cashier and a ranch hand in Montana. No military family, no competitive shooting background beyond local matches. No formal education past high school. How does someone with that background develop skills that rival, no, exceed the best snipers in the world?" Mara held his gaze. "I had time. I had motivation. And I had a father who taught me that limits are just excuses." "Your father was a machinist," Rhodes said, reading from his tablet. "Died of cancer when you were 18. No military service. No competitive shooting record beyond regional club matches. He taught me the fundamentals. I built on them." "For 3 years." "Yes." Rhodes set the tablet down. "Staff Sergeant, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've evaluated hundreds of operators. The timeline doesn't add up. 3 years isn't enough to reach this level, not without institutional support. Not without access to resources most people don't have." Mara's expression didn't change. "Then I'm an outlier." "Or you're hiding something." The room went silent. Holt stepped forward. "That's enough." Rhodes ignored him. "Staff Sergeant Vance, have you received training from any foreign entities?" "No." "Have you been approached by private military contractors?" "No." "Have you used performance-enhancing substances of any kind?" Mara's jaw tightened. "No." "Then explain to me how you're doing the impossible." "I don't know what you want me to say." "I practiced. I studied. I executed. That's it." Mendez cut in. "Gentlemen, I think we're done here." Carver raised a hand. "Colonel, with respect, you've asked your questions. Staff Sergeant Vance has answered them. Unless you have evidence of wrongdoing, this interview is over." Rhodes stared at Mendez. "We're not finished." "Yes, you are." Mendez's voice was flat. "Staff Sergeant Vance is under my command. If you have concerns about her conduct, you file them through proper channels. You don't ambush her at 0530 with accusations disguised as questions." Carver exchanged a glance with Rhodes. Something unspoken passed between them. "Understood, Colonel," Carver said. "We'll be in touch." They left. The door closed. Mara exhaled slowly. Mendez turned to her. "You okay?" "Yes, sir." "They're going to keep digging." "I know." "Is there anything I need to know, anything that's going to come back and bite us?" Mara met his eyes. "No, sir. Everything I told them is true." Mendez studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, dismissed." She turned to leave. "Vance?" She stopped. "You're a hell of a soldier. Don't let them make you think otherwise." "Thank you, sir." She walked out. Holt followed. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise, pale light creeping over the mountains, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. Holt stopped her. "Talk to me." "About what?" "About whatever you're not saying." Mara looked at him. "I told them the truth." "I know, but there's truth, and then there's the whole truth. Which one did they get?" She was quiet for a moment, then, "The one that matters." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Holt shook his head. "You know they're not going to stop, right? They'll keep pushing until they find something, real or imagined. Let them push. And if they find a reason to pull you out, then I deal with it when it happens." Holt watched her face. "You're not worried?" "Worry doesn't change outcomes. Preparation does." "That's something your dad taught you?" "Yeah." Holt nodded slowly. "You must have been one hell of a man." He was. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun climb higher. Then Holt said, "You've got another mission in 6 hours. Get some rest." "Copy." She walked back to her quarters, closed the door, and sat on the cot. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from anger. She pulled out her notebook and flipped to the first page. Her father's handwriting stared back at her. Faded ink, neat lines, precise diagrams. "Mara, limits exist only in the mind. The math doesn't lie. Trust it. Always." She traced the words with her finger. They'd questioned her integrity, her honesty, her capability. They'd looked at her and seen an impossibility that needed explanation. They hadn't seen the hours, the failures, the blisters and bruises and sleepless nights spent calculating wind drift and bullet drop. They hadn't seen the ranch in Montana where she'd set up targets at 1,500 yards and shot until her shoulder was purple. They hadn't seen her working double shifts to afford ammunition, skipping meals to save money, driving 6 hours to find ranges that could accommodate the distances she needed. They saw results. They didn't see the cost. Mara closed the notebook and lay back on the cot. 6 hours until the next mission. She closed her eyes and started calculating. The mission brief was short. Target, enemy communications relay. Location, Hilltop Compound, 12 miles south. Distance from OP, 1,890 yards. Mission, disable the relay to disrupt enemy coordination ahead of a coalition offensive. Simple, surgical, high value. The team inserted at dawn. They moved fast. No contact, no delays. The observation point was a rocky outcrop with clear sightlines and natural cover. Mara set up her rifle. Holt deployed the team. Reeves powered up the thermal gear. The compound appeared through her scope, a small cluster of buildings, solar panels, a radio tower with a satellite dish at the top. Holt's voice came through her earpiece. "Vance, assessment. Clear shot. Minimal wind. Relay is visible. How many rounds to disable? 2. Maybe 3 if the first doesn't sever the mounting. Take it." Mara settled in. Range, 1,890 yards. Wind, 4 knots, steady. Temperature, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. She adjusted the scope and exhaled. The first shot broke clean. The satellite dish shattered, fragments spinning into the air. She chambered another round and fired. The mounting bracket exploded. The dish collapsed. "Relay is down," Reeves confirmed. "Mission complete." They extracted without incident. But on the flight back, Mara noticed something. Holt was watching her differently. Not with suspicion, with something else. Respect. Maybe trust. Back at Cobra, Mendez was waiting. "Nice work," he said. "Clean, efficient, no complications." "Thank you, sir." "Walk with me." They moved away from the landing pad toward the perimeter wire. The desert stretched out beyond the fence, endless, barren, indifferent. Mendez stopped and turned to face her. "I got a call this morning. From a general I won't name. He wanted to know if you were real." Mara frowned. "Sir? Your record, your shots. He thought it was fabricated, propaganda. I had to send him ballistics data and satellite imagery to prove it wasn't." "What did he say?" "He said you're either the best sniper he's ever seen or the luckiest. I told him luck doesn't make 9 consecutive kills at extreme range." Mara said nothing. Mendez continued. "Here's the problem. You're too good, and when you're too good, people start asking questions. Some of those questions are academic, some are political, and some are dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "The kind that turn you into a symbol, a propaganda tool, a recruitment poster. They'll want to parade you in front of cameras, put you on magazine covers, use you to sell a narrative." He paused. "Is that what you want?" "No, sir." "Then what do you want?" Mara looked out at the desert. "I want to do the job. That's it." Mendez nodded. "I believe you, but wanting something and getting it are 2 different things. The people making decisions don't care what you want. They care what you represent." "Then what do I do?" "You keep your head down, you keep shooting, and you trust that I'll run interference as long as I can." He met her eyes. "But eventually, even I won't be able to stop them. You understand that?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Now get some rest. You've earned it." 2 weeks passed. 6 more missions. 4 more confirmed kills. The team moved like a machine, efficient, effective, unstoppable. But the pressure kept building. Reporters started showing up at the base, asking questions. Command issued a media blackout on operational details. Mara's name was scrubbed from official reports. She became a ghost, a rumor. The sniper who didn't miss. Holt noticed the change, the way she moved through the base, head down, eyes forward, avoiding conversation. The way she volunteered for every mission, no matter how dangerous. He found her one night in the rec tent, alone, cleaning her rifle. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah." "You don't look okay." "I'm fine." Holt sat down. "You know, lying to your team leader is generally a bad idea." Mara stopped cleaning and looked at him. "I'm handling it." "Handling what?" "Everything." "That's not an answer." She set the rifle down. "What do you want me to say? That I'm tired? That I'm frustrated? That I didn't sign up for this?" "Did you?" "No, I signed up to serve. To do the job. To make a difference. I didn't sign up to be questioned, scrutinized, and treated like a science experiment." Holt nodded slowly. "Fair. But here's the thing. You knew this would happen. The moment you made that first shot, you knew people would notice. You knew it would change things." "I thought they'd be grateful." "They are. That's the problem. Gratitude turns into expectation. Expectation turns into pressure. And pressure breaks people." Mara met his eyes. "I won't break." "Everyone breaks eventually." "Not me." Holt studied her face. "You know what I see when I look at you?" "What?" "Someone who's been carrying weight for so long she doesn't remember what it feels like to put it down." Mara looked away. Holt continued. "Your dad, how long was he sick?" 3 years. "And you took care of him?" "Yeah." "While working 2 jobs?" "Yeah." "And training to shoot?" Mara didn't answer. Holt leaned back. "You've been carrying weight your whole life, Mara, and you're good at it. Too good. But eventually, even the strongest people need help." "I don't need help. I need people to leave me alone and let me work." "That's not going to happen." "Then I'll deal with it." "How?" "The same way I've dealt with everything else. 1 shot at a time." The call came 3 days later. Mendez summoned the entire team to the operations center. His expression was grim. "New mission," he said. "High priority, high risk." He pulled up a map, a valley, a compound, red circles marking enemy positions. Intelligence confirms that the remaining regional command staff are consolidating at this location. We're talking about 15 to 20 high-value targets in one place. Brigade commanders, logistics officers, the people who keep this insurgency running. Reeves whistled. That's a target-rich environment. It's also heavily defended. We're looking at layered security, roving patrols, and probable air defense systems. The coalition is planning a full assault in 72 hours. Our job is to provide advanced reconnaissance and, if possible, eliminate key personnel before the assault begins. Holt leaned forward. What's the distance from OP to compound? Mendez looked at Mara. 2,680 yards. The room went silent. Ortega shook his head. That's over 1.5 miles. Correct. Tron frowned. That's beyond any confirmed combat kill on record. Also correct. Everyone looked at Mara. She stared at the map, her mind already calculating. Holt spoke carefully. Sir, that's ambitious. It's necessary, Mendez said. If we can take out command staff before the assault, we save lives, coalition lives. And if we can't, then we provide reconnaissance and get out. Holt turned to Mara. Can you make that shot? She didn't answer immediately. She pulled out her notebook, flipped to a blank page, and started writing. Range, 2,680 yards. Elevation, unknown. Wind, unknown. Temperature, unknown. Too many variables, too much distance. She looked up. I need to see the location. Get actual data. Run calculations. We insert in 18 hours, Mendez said. You'll have time on site. Mara nodded slowly. Then we'll find out. The insertion was smooth. The observation point was a knife-edge ridge with a sheer drop on one side and a gentle slope on the other. Perfect concealment, perfect visibility. Mara set up her rifle and began her work. She lasered the compound. 2,683 yards. Close enough to her estimate. Wind was brutal, gusting between 10 and 18 knots, shifting direction every few minutes. Temperature was 74 degrees Fahrenheit and climbing. Humidity was low. Barometric pressure was unstable. She filled 10 pages with calculations, adjusted for Coriolis effect, factored in altitude, cross-referenced every variable against past data. The math kept leading to the same conclusion, possible, but improbable. Holt crawled up beside her. What's the verdict? 50-50, maybe worse. That's not great odds. No. But you'll try? Mara looked through the scope. The compound was visible, tiny, distant, shimmering in the heat. If I get a clean shot, yeah. And if you miss, then I miss. Holt nodded. Fair enough. They waited. Hours passed. The sun climbed. Heat radiated off the rocks. At 1420 hours, vehicles began arriving. Reeves tracked them on thermal. Multiple targets, counting 12. No, 15. They're gathering in the main building. Mara watched through her scope. Figures moved between vehicles and doorways, too fast, too far. Then, one figure stopped, stood in the open, looked toward the valley. Reeves spoke quietly. Thermal confirms that's a primary target, high confidence. Mara zoomed in. Gray beard, tactical vest, command presence. Her heartbeat slowed. This was it, the impossible shot. She adjusted the scope, calculated wind, factored in motion. Her finger found the trigger, and deep in her chest something whispered, "You can do this." She exhaled. The world went silent, and she fired. The rifle's recoil was familiar now, a violent punch that Mara's body absorbed without thought. The sound echoed across the valley, rolling through the mountains like distant thunder. She stayed on the scope, eyes locked on the target, breath held. The bullet flew. For 4 eternal seconds, physics became prayer. The round traced an impossible arc across the sky, rising against gravity, bending with the wind, dropping toward Earth at terminal velocity. Mara's calculations had accounted for 39 feet of bullet drop, 11 feet of windage, atmospheric drag, temperature gradient, the rotation of the Earth itself. Everything had to be perfect. And then, impact. The figure's head snapped back. He collapsed like a string had been cut. The compound erupted into chaos before his body hit the ground. "Holy shit," Reeves whispered. "Confirmed hit, target down." Mara didn't move. She chambered another round with mechanical precision, her hands steady, her breathing controlled. Through the scope, she watched men scatter, some diving for cover, others scanning the valley, searching for a threat they couldn't see. A second figure appeared in a doorway, armed, shouting orders. Mara adjusted. Wind had shifted, now gusting at 16 knots from the northwest. She compensated, exhaled halfway, and fired. The second figure dropped. "Two down," Reeves said, his voice tight with disbelief. Ortega was laughing, a sharp, incredulous sound. "She's doing it again." Holt's voice cut through. "Vance? Status?" "Engaging," she said quietly. A third target emerged from cover, running toward a vehicle trying to escape. Mara tracked him, calculated lead, adjusted for motion and distance. She fired. The target stumbled and fell. 3, Reeves confirmed. The compound was chaos now. Vehicles starting, men shouting, gunfire erupting as defenders fired blindly toward the valley. None of them had any idea where the shots were coming from. The distance was too great. The angle too oblique. Mara scanned for additional targets. Her heartbeat was slow, steady, controlled. The rifle was an extension of her will. The math was absolute. A fourth figure appeared, moving fast, coordinating the evacuation. Command presence, high value. She adjusted the scope, calculated, fired. 4. Holt keyed the radio. "Pegasus? Overwatch 3. Multiple confirmed hits. Enemy command structure is collapsing. Repeat, command structure is collapsing." Static. Then, "Copy Overwatch 3. Continue engagement as targets present." Mara chambered another round. Through the scope, the compound was a hive of confusion. Vehicles were pulling out, leaving bodies behind. The remaining personnel were retreating into hardened structures, abandoning the open ground. No more shots. The window had closed. "Vance, status?" Holt asked. 4 confirmed. No additional targets visible. "Copy. Hold position. Wait for secondary." She pulled back from the scope and blinked. The world expanded again, color, depth, sound. Her shoulder ached from recoil. Her hands were steady, but her pulse was starting to climb now that the focus had broken. 4 shots, 4 kills, 2,683 yards, the longest confirmed combat kill in history, and she'd done it 4 times in 3 minutes. Ortega slid up beside her. "You just rewrote the record books." "Records don't matter," Mara said. "The hell they don't. You know what you just did?" "The job." "No, you did the impossible. Again." Mara didn't respond. She was already refocusing on the compound, scanning for movement, calculating contingencies. Reeves spoke up. "Thermal shows multiple signatures retreating into hardened structures. Vehicles are pulling out. Looks like full evacuation." Holt checked his watch. "Pegasus, Overwatch 3. Enemy is withdrawing. Recommend immediate coalition advance to capitalize on disruption." "Copy Overwatch 3. Stand by." They held position for 90 minutes. The compound emptied. By the time coalition forces arrived, it was a ghost town. Abandoned weapons, scattered documents, and 4 bodies cooling in the dust. The team extracted at dusk, moving fast and silent through the rocks. The Blackhawk picked them up 6 miles north, and they flew back to Cobra as the sun set over the mountains. No one spoke during the flight, but everyone kept glancing at Mara. Yet, Mendez was waiting on the tarmac when they landed. His expression was unreadable. "Conference room. Now." The team followed him inside. The door closed. Mendez turned to face them. Ballistics confirmed 4 kills. All headshots. Range confirmed at 2,683 yards. He looked at Mara. "You just broke the world record. By over 200 yards." Silence. Mendez continued. "Coalition forces swept the compound. They recovered documents, hard drives, and intelligence that will dismantle enemy operations for the next 6 months. Command is calling this the most successful disruption operation of the entire deployment." Ortega grinned. "Hell yeah." Mendez didn't smile. "They're also asking questions. Lots of them. About how a staff sergeant made shots that shouldn't be physically possible. about what kind of training she received, about whether we're running some kind of classified program. Holt frowned. What did you tell them? I told them the truth, that Staff Sergeant Vance is a self-trained marksman who practiced for 3 years and executed under combat conditions. They didn't believe me. That's their problem, Holt said. No, Commander. It's our problem. Because those questions are coming from people who can pull her out of the field and put her under a microscope. Mendez looked at Mara. You're about to become very famous, Staff Sergeant, whether you want to be or not. Mara's jaw tightened. I don't want recognition. I want to keep working. I know, but that's not how this works. You just became a strategic asset, and strategic assets don't get to choose their assignments. Then I'll refuse the assignment. Mendez shook his head. It doesn't work that way. You're military. You follow orders. Even if those orders waste my skills? Even then. Mara stood. With respect, sir, if they pull me out of the field, they're making a mistake. I'm more useful here than I am in a classroom or on a stage. I agree, but the decision isn't mine to make. Then whose is it? People above my pay grade. Mara turned to leave. Staff Sergeant. She stopped. Mendez's voice softened. For what it's worth, I've been doing this for 26 years. I've commanded hundreds of soldiers. You're one of the best I've ever seen. Don't let them take that away from you. Mara nodded. I won't, sir. She left the room. Outside, the desert night was cold and clear. Stars filled the sky in dense clusters. Mara walked to the perimeter fence and stared out at the darkness. Holt found her there 10 minutes later. You okay? He asked. No. Fair enough. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets. You know what's going to happen, right? They'll pull me out, put me in front of cameras, turn me into a symbol. Probably. And I can't stop it. No, you can't. Mara closed her eyes. I didn't do this for recognition. I did it because it needed to be done. I know. Then why does it feel like punishment? Holt was quiet for a moment. Then, because the world doesn't know what to do with people like you. People who operate at levels that seem impossible. They want to understand it, replicate it, control it. And when they can't, they turn it into a story, a legend, something that fits their narrative. I don't want to be a legend. Too late. You already are. Mara opened her eyes and looked at him. What would you do? If I were you? Yeah. Holt thought about it. I'd write it out, take the recognition, use the platform to advocate for better training, better resources, better support for people who want to push limits, turn the attention into something useful. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it's better than fighting a battle you can't win. Mara turned back to the desert. My dad used to say that the only battles worth fighting are the ones where you're outmatched, because those are the ones that prove what you're made of. Your dad sounds like he was a philosopher. He was a machinist, but he thought about things. Holt smiled. I wish I could have met him. He would have liked you. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars. Then Holt said, Whatever happens next, you've got a team that has your back. Remember that. I will. Good. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Opom. The orders came down 48 hours later. Staff Sergeant Mara Vance was to be reassigned to the U.S. Army Sniper School at Fort Moore, Georgia, as a lead instructor and curriculum developer. Effective immediately. The team gathered in the rec tent to say goodbye. Reeves handed her a bottle. For the road. Don't drink it all at once. Tran gave her a small notebook. In case you run out of pages. Ortega pulled her into a bear hug. You're the best shooter I've ever seen. Don't let them turn you into something you're not. I won't, she said. Holt walked her to the airstrip. A C-130 sat on the tarmac, engines idling, ramp down. You ready? He asked. No. Good. Means you're human. Mara looked at him. Thank you for trusting me, for giving me the shot. I didn't give you anything. You earned it. Still, thank you. Holt extended his hand. She shook it. One more thing, he said. When you get to Fort Moore and they ask you how you did it, tell them the truth, all of it. Not because they deserve it, but because the next generation needs to hear it. What truth? that limits are just excuses, that preparation beats talent, that the quiet person calculating in the corner is the one you should never underestimate. Mara almost smiled. That sounds like something my dad would say. Then he was a smart man. She turned and walked toward the plane. Holt watched her go, small, quiet, unremarkable in every way except the one that mattered. She climbed the ramp and disappeared into the darkness of the cargo bay. The ramp closed, the engines roared, the C-130 rolled down the runway and lifted into the sky. Holt stood on the tarmac until the plane became a speck, then vanished entirely. Fort Moore, Georgia, was a different world. No dust, no mountains, no imminent danger. Just classrooms, ranges, and soldiers who looked at Mara like she was a myth made flesh. The head of the sniper school was a grizzled master sergeant named Kowalski. He'd been shooting for 30 years. He'd heard the stories. He didn't believe half of them. Until he watched her shoot. She made a 2,100-yard shot on her first day. Cold bore. No warm-up. Hit center mass. Kowalski stared through the spotting scope for a full minute before speaking. How? Math, Mara said. Bullshit. Math and practice. He looked at her. You got any idea how many people are going to want to meet you, interview you, study you? A lot. And you're okay with that? No, but I'll deal with it. Kowalski nodded slowly. All right, here's how this works. You teach what you know. You don't hold back. You don't dumb it down. You give them everything, the math, the mindset, the discipline. Because if you don't, you're wasting everyone's time. Clear? Clear. Good. Class starts Monday. Don't be late. The first class was 30 snipers, men and women from every branch, every background, every skill level. They sat in a classroom that smelled like coffee and gun oil, waiting. Mara stood at the front, hands at her sides, silent. Finally, she spoke. My name is Staff Sergeant Mara Vance. I'm here to teach you how to make shots you think are impossible. Not because I'm special, but because I did the work. And if you do the work, you can do it too. She pulled out her notebook, worn, stained, filled with 3 years of data. This is how you start. You calculate, you practice, you fail, you learn from the failure, you calculate again, you practice again, and eventually the impossible becomes routine. She opened the notebook and showed them the pages, the equations, the diagrams, the shot logs. There's no secret, no trick, just math and repetition and the willingness to put in time when no one's watching. One of the students raised a hand. How long did it take you? 3 years. To get to your level? To get to the point where I trusted my calculations more than my doubts. Another student spoke up. What's the longest shot you've made in combat? 2,683 yards. The room went silent. That's impossible, someone muttered. Mara met their eyes. It was, until it wasn't. 6 months later, the first class graduated. They'd learned the math, the discipline, the mindset. Some would go on to break records. Others would serve quietly, executing missions no one would ever hear about. But all of them carried the lesson Mara had taught them. Limits exist only until someone does the work to erase them. Mara stayed at Fort Moore for 2 years. She taught. She wrote curriculum. She refined methods. She turned sniping from art into science. And then quietly, she requested a transfer back to operational deployment. Command approved it. She returned to the field, not to Holt's team, which had rotated home, but to a new unit in a new conflict. She was older now, more experienced, but the work was the same. Observe, calculate, execute. She made shots that shouldn't be possible, and she never sought credit, because the work was never about recognition. It was about results. Years later, a young specialist sat in a classroom at Fort Moore, holding a worn notebook filled with calculations and diagrams. The instructor, a grizzled sergeant with 30 years of experience, stood at the front of the room. That notebook, the sergeant said, belonged to Staff Sergeant Mara Vance. She donated it to the school when she rotated out. Everything you need to know is in those pages. The math, the mindset, the discipline. The specialist flipped through the pages, studying the equations, the shot logs, the notes scrawled in careful handwriting. On the first page, one line stood out. Limits exist only in the mind. The math doesn't lie. Trust it. Always. The specialist looked up. Where is she now? The sergeant smiled. Still out there, still making impossible shots, still proving that the quiet person in the corner is the one you should never underestimate. Somewhere in a desert half a world away, Mara Vance lay behind a rifle on a windswept ridge. Through her scope, a target moved 2,400 yards away, small, distant, protected. She calculated, adjusted, exhaled, and fired. The shot was perfect. It always was, because she'd done the work, and the work never lied. 3 shots ended a war, not because they were loud, but because they were precise. Never underestimate the quiet person who has already solved the impossible.